Welcome to educator.com. This lesson is about fractions, decimals, and percents. In this lesson, you'll be converting fractions to decimals, decimals to percents, and fractions to percents. Applications for this are for processing statistics, comparing data, and using numbers in different situations. A percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. The percent symbol means per 100, or the amount out of 100. Let's compare a fraction to a decimal to a percent. Let's look at this box here. This is an entire unit of 100 boxes, and out of the 100 boxes, 31 have been highlighted blue. So the fraction that has been highlighted blue is 31 out of 100. As a decimal, that would be written as 0.31. If each of these boxes represented a penny, that would be 31 cents. And the percentage is 31 out of 100, or 31%. Let's try writing a percent as a fraction. To write a percent as a fraction, you take the number and put it over a fraction bar, and well, first we should take the 47. It's out of 100, so you would put it over 100. So another way that you could look at this is to change the 47 into a decimal first, which you would move the decimal left twice, 1, 2, and see that it's 0.47. And then you could take the 47, put it over a fraction bar, and count 2 places, the hundredths place value, 2 zeros, and put a 1 in front. 25% as a fraction. That's 25 out of 100. Now 25 out of 100 can be simplified, and at this level, whenever you're working with fractions, your answer should always be simplified. So I know that the top and the bottom can be, or the numerator and denominator can be divided by 25. So this 25% as a fraction equals 1 over 4. So notice that your percentage is not always going to have similar numbers as your answer. In this case, 47% looks a lot like the fraction 47 of 100, but 25% does not look much like 1 over 4. Write 2 over 10 as a percent. So to make 2 over 10 as a percent, you're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. 10 doesn't go into 2, but it will go into 20 2 times. So your decimal is 0.2, and to change it to a percent, you move your decimal to the right 2 places, 1, 2. Fill in the 0. So your fraction, 2 over 10, is 20%. If you think about it, 2 over 10 can be simplified to 1/5. And what's 1/5 of a dollar? 20 cents, or 20% of the dollar. Write 57 over 100 as a percent. So I'm going to divide the numerator 57 by 100. It won't go in, but it'll go into 575 times. And then later, it will go into 707 times. So you have 0.57. Move the decimal to the right 2 times, and you get 57%. And remember that percent means per 100. So 57 per 100, 57%. Write 3 over 25 as a percent. Once again, divide the numerator by the denominator. 25 will not go into 3, but it will go into 30 once. And then it will go into 50 twice. So 3 over 25 is 0.12 as a decimal. Remember to move your decimal to the right twice, and it equals 12%. So 3 over 25 is 12%. If you take 3 over 25 and you want to make it per 100, the 25 can become, oops, let me rewrite this. The 25 can become 100 when you multiply by 4. 3 times 4 is 12. So notice there's your 12%. Write a decimal as a percent. We already did that on the last slide when we were changing decimals into percents. So if you remember, you're going to take the decimal and move it twice. So it's 85%. Be careful with the placement of the decimal. The rule is always to move the decimal twice. So even though there's only one place, you still need to move it twice. So you'll fill in the 0. So this becomes 30%. And once again, notice the placement of the decimal is a little different. You're still moving it twice. And in this case, the percent becomes 4%. So the rule is always move the decimal to the right 2 places. So don't immediately look at this number and say 3%, or this and say 4%, or this and say 0.04%. You need to make sure that you're moving your decimal twice. And yes, the last one would be 4% when you move your decimal twice. Write 15% as a decimal and a fraction. So as a decimal, if you change a decimal to percent by moving the decimal to the right twice, then you're going to change a percent back to a decimal by moving to the left twice. So I'm going to take 15% and move 2 places. So it's called 0.15, 0.5. That's as a decimal. Then as a fraction, I'm going to take the 15, put it over a fraction bar. There were 2 decimal places, so that's the 100th place, so 2 zeros. And I'm going to remember to simplify. Divide by 5, divide by 5. I get 3/20. So 15% as a decimal is 0.15, and as a fraction is simplified to 3/20. Write 1/20 as a decimal and a percent. So the fraction 1/20, change it into a decimal, is the numerator 1 divided by the denominator 20, which it won't go in, and it won't go into 10 either, but it will go into 105 times. So it's 0.05 as a decimal. And then remember, to change into a percent, you move your decimal to the right 2 places. So it's 5%. So 1/20 as a decimal is 0.05, and as a percent, it's 5%. Be very careful when there is only one number in your answer, because when you're changing to a percent or a decimal back and forth, you need to always move your decimal 2 places. So that means you'll have to consider adding in a 0 or taking out a 0. Write 65% as a fraction and a decimal. I'm going to take 65% and write it as a decimal first, because that's the most relatable. So you move it back 2 places. So it's 0.65 as a decimal. And then as a fraction, I'm going to take this 65, count the decimal places. 2 places means 2 zeros. It's in the 100th place value. And now I'm going to simplify by dividing by 5. 5 will go into 65 13 times, I believe. So once here and 3 times here. So 13. And 5 will go into 120 times. So as a fraction, it's 13/20. Remember, you need to simplify. And as a decimal, it's 0.65. 2 places to the left. Students were asked to choose their favorite color. Here are the results. 27 students chose red, 33 chose blue, 28 chose green, and 12 chose black. How many students were surveyed? Well, here's the number of students for each color, so let's add up all the students and see how many were surveyed. Remember, when adding large groups of numbers, you should always create pairs of 10. 7 and 3 makes 10, and 8 and 2 makes 10, so that's 20. 2 and 3 makes 5, and 2 and 2 and 1 makes 5, so 5 plus 5 is 10. So how many students were surveyed? 100 students. What fraction, percent, and decimal of students chose green? So the fraction that chose green was 28 out of 100, which I could divide by 4, the top, and divide the bottom by 4, and I will get 7 out of 25. So 7 out of 25 chose green when the fraction is simplified. As a percentage, I have 28, so I'm going to move the decimal to the left. So it's going to be 28%. And to change it into a decimal, I'm going to move the decimal to the left twice, and it's going to be 0.28. So the fraction of students that chose green was 7 over 25. The percent of students that chose green was 28%. And the decimal of students that chose green was 0.28. Thank you for watching educator.com.